The panel, tasked with investigating the circumstances surrounding the docking of Lady R in Simonstown last December, has found no evidence to support the allegations that indeed weapons were loaded onto the vessel that was headed for Russia. This is the announcement that was made by the presidency. And, you know, there was a big revelation, accusation leveled against the South African government that indeed that was the case by US Ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Brigety. So what we want to look into tonight is where Armscor stands on the matter and what their involvement in the Lady R saga was, what the extent of it was, and also whether what are the reasons that South Africa and South Africans who are interested in the subject won't be able to have full sight of that report, the reason why some of the aspects of that report have been classified. So let's bring in then Armscor Chair, Dr. Phillip Dexter. Phillip, good evening to you and welcome. Thank you for joining us. So as the South African public, we will not be shown the full report, and we understand that's because it might jeopardize the work and the safety of the SANDF, according to the presidency. But given this climate of distrust between government and the public over a variety of issues, how would you assuage the demand being made for full transparency on what the report actually found and what that investigation revealed?
Well, I think the president rightly put in place a commission with an independent panel. Obviously, those are people who are sworn to secrecy. And they've been able to view all of the evidence and take submissions. And they've come to a finding, which I think, you know, the public has to accept. I don't think there's a country in the world where anybody would expect the government to reveal military secrets that could jeopardize the men and women who defend that country. So, you know, I accept that the public may have distrust about various things, but the report indicates clearly that the ship brought stuff and offloaded. It did not load anything to take back to Russia, other than groceries, for the record. So, you know, I think people going on about this and trying to make an issue out of it have to accept that government has limits as to what it can do in terms of giving information to the public.
All right, so the report will be, you know, those aspects that haven't been released will be classified. So make it clearer for us, Phillip, those of us who are not in the space, and you've painted that context just now, to understand the types of things that could jeopardize key personnel or agencies, either domestically or elsewhere. And I've heard in other interviews that you've done, you know, as you've reiterated now, it's ludicrous for demands to be made, for example, for the ship's manifest to be made public.
Well, obviously, I mean, the type of weapons, the type of ammunition, whatever it is that's been offloaded, being used, as the presidency said, by our special forces who are busy fighting insurgents in Mozambique. They're busy fighting, you know, trying to keep the peace in the DRC and other countries. If the enemy who they are fighting knows what they have, it's obvious that they can take countermeasures. So no responsible government anywhere in the world would reveal such information. And I think the people who are calling for it are absolutely irresponsible, because what they're saying is that for their political purposes, we must jeopardize the lives of our soldiers. And that's utterly ludicrous.
Phillip, you are asking as Armscor for those who have made the allegations of weapons being uploaded, headed to Russia, to take responsibility. Please be specific on what that should look like.
Well, look, I can't say what that should be, but I think political parties are accountable to Parliament, and I think Parliament should take steps against the people who have told these lies and who have peddled this misinformation. And I think the US should take its ambassador to task, because if you think about it, a false story peddled by people who went and took photos of a ship in Simonstown, who then claimed that there was weapons were being loaded, then provided no evidence, continued to claim this. Even when we told them it wasn't the truth, we went so far as putting a commission of inquiry in place. But what has happened? The reputation of the government, the reputation of Armscor, the reputation of the SANDF, and the South African economy have all had to suffer the consequences of this kind of cowboy behavior by political parties and by the US ambassador, and it's simply not acceptable. They demand accountability and transparency from us, and we accept that. But they also have to keep those same standards of accountability and transparency. Accountability means take the consequences for your actions. Transparency means show us the evidence that you claim you have. And if you don't have it, you must apologize and you must go and mend the damage that you've done.
So, again, to that point, when an ambassador, as you've said, can make accusations, and at the time he seemed wholly convicted of, convinced of, and then scurry away unaccountable, it seems like that démarche which he received straight after was like a rap on the knuckles, disproportionate, as you've just mentioned, to the financial and reputational impact of his allegations. 3 years, 3-year lows for the rand, a trade agreement in jeopardy, and in your view, as you say, certainly not accountability, calling for an apology and a dispatching of that ambassador back to his country. It leads to the question, Philip, we are in precarious times, and the defense often is that we need friends and economic partners. Do you think the US is our friend?
Well, look, I think we've always had good relations with the US, and I think there's lots of trade and cultural and other relations between South Africa and the US. But we live in very fraught times. And I think we all know that a great deal of pressure has been put on our country to take sides in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. I think the fact that we've chosen to be independent and chosen to be non-aligned in this has meant that countries who have taken positions want to put pressure on us. And I suspect that a lot of that lies behind these allegations. But the point is that I don't think it's up to me or anybody at Armscor to say what the sanctions should be. But as a company that has suffered, in this process, its reputation has been tarnished by these allegations. I think that us calling for accountability and calling for transparency is a fair thing to do. We leave it up to our political leaders in Parliament. We leave it up to the political leaders in the US to decide what is appropriate. Yeah. But I think it would be wrong for them to just allow this behavior to have taken place for an absolute lie to have been peddled.
Right. Just a quick one, Dr. Phillip Dexter, because we spoke about the reputational, damage. We also spoke about the effects on the rand. But for Armscor personally, I mean, has there been any other adverse impact, financial impact to a company, as you say, that in a way is fighting for its existence?
Well, no financial impact that we can identify. But the point is that it doesn't have to be financial. As you say, there's a great deal of mistrust. When people do this, it simply adds to that, and it's unfortunate. I think we are happy taking account for things we've done wrong, but it's unfair for us to be accused and convicted of a crime that we haven't committed.
Armscor Chair Dr. Phillip Dexter, thank you for talking to us.